Hello, my name is Johnny, and today I'm going to show you how to do a crown prep in less than 5 minutes. The video, I mean. So today we're going to be working on tooth number 30, which is the first mandibular molar. When we do a crown prep, we want the reduction to be anatomic. But what does that really mean? We want the shape of our crown prep to mimic the shape of the tooth before we even took the handpiece to it. So to do that, we need to know what the actual tooth looks like. The easiest way for me to do a good occlusal reduction is to use a bunch of U-shapes, kind of like this. And from the buccal view, you can also see that the cusps have an inverted U shape. So when you take the handpiece to the tooth, make sure you're following this U motion. For this tooth, we also want to pay special attention to the distal buccal cusp. As you can see here, it's more lingual than the other two buccal cusps. We need to pay close attention to this specifically for this tooth because the central groove is not a straight line like 18 or 31, so it's not as easy to do a occlusal reduction on this tooth. So for today's prep, we're doing an FGC or full gold crown. For a full gold crown, you want a chamfer margin, and we're gonna use an 856-016. The 856-016 is 1 millimeter at the tip and 1.6 millimeters at the thickest part of the burr. This will be important for later. So for our prep dimensions, we got a 0.5 millimeter chamfer margin all the way, and we also got a 1 millimeter non-functional cusp reduction and a 1.5 millimeter functional cusp reduction. Before starting the prep, you can make a reduction guide out of putty and use it in order to measure how much reduction you've done. The last thing we need to talk about is taper and TOC. The taper of the prep is the angle of that specific wall, and we want that taper to be between 5 and 10 degrees. The TOC is the total occlusal convergence, which is the taper on both sides added together to give us a combined total. And we want the TOC to stay between 10 and 20 degrees. Anything more and the crown doesn't have enough retention, anything less and you probably have undercuts. To cut a good prep, you need to be able to see. I usually sit at 8 o'clock or 12 o'clock for mandibular molars and will keep bouncing between the two depending on what surface I'm cutting. Here's a table of what I find is optimal. I also find it easier to hold the handpiece upside down and fulcrum on the lower chin. It feels weird at first, but once you get used to it, I find it much more stable. If I'm not using my left hand for retraction, I'll also use my left thumb for extra stability. I start my preps with the occlusal reduction starting with the buccal cusps. Remember how I told you the measurement of the 856-016 was important? Well, we can use it as a measuring tool for our occlusal reductions. We will also use an 856-012 and an 8856-016 for this prep. The 856-012 will be used for the interproximal since it's just a skinnier 856-016, and the 8856-016 will be used for final smoothing since it's the same size as an 856-016, just with a finer texture. I'll start with the reduction grooves, sinking my burr in to reach 1 millimeter on the lingual and 1.5 on the buccal. You want to make your reduction grooves on the triangular ridges of the cusps and the developmental grooves, then connect the dots. Usually I also like to do one cusp at a time just so my occlusal table doesn't look like a mess. Remember to use a U-shaped motion. This is how the reduction looks from the occlusal, and here's the buccal. Notice the U-shaped uniform reduction? I'll move on to finish the other two buccal cusps. You want to finish the buccal cusps first, then move to the lingual. That way you know where the central groove is. For the lingual cusps, I like to think of the triangular ridge as 45 degrees from the center, so I make sure my reduction grooves follow this. The distal lingual cusp is definitely the most difficult to reduce. Make sure the angulation of your burr is always matching the cuspal incline because it's pretty common to under-reduce the central groove area if you don't do this. Okay, now that the occlusal reduction is finished, we can retrace the central groove and smooth things over with an 8856-016, but make sure to turn your RPM down. Next up, I'd like to reduce the buccal. Because our margin is a 0.5 millimeter chamfer, we can use exactly half of the tip of the 856-016, which has a 1 millimeter tip, to know our margin is the correct size. It's also important to note the spinning direction of the burr depending on the direction you are cutting. The burr can rotate clockwise or counterclockwise and cuts best when rotating in the opposite direction of your brush stroke. Now for the interproximal, I switched to an 856-012 because it is thinner. I create a thin shell and break it off at the end to make sure the adjacent tooth isn't nicked. Then I keep reducing until I can fit an 856-016 all the way down to the margin. The lingual is pretty much the same story, just make sure to reduce the distal lingual enough because that's probably the hardest part of this prep. Mandibular molars are also lingually tilted, so we need to reduce the buccal with 2 planes. You can use reduction grooves again. Now that our prep is mostly complete, I'll switch to an 88-56-016 fine burr, drop the RPMs, and trace over the entire prep to smooth everything out. I also like to add a very slight 360-degree occlusal bevel to make sure the surfaces are as smooth as possible.
That's the game!
I hope this video was helpful. This is the way I like to do my crown preps. People have their own methods, but I suggest you try them all and figure out what works best for you. But most importantly, have fun practicing.